All right, I'm jumping into action here with day one of all of the information that I would love to leave behind if I were to leave tomorrow. From that kind of mindset, or a month from now, or a year from now, it doesn't have to be like I'm gonna die imminently. But if were to die, I wish I would have said. So everything that I believe in that maybe doesn't come up in everyday conversation or for whatever reason. So, what I would want you to know is let's start at birth. When we come into this life, because this is really about like what to do with the predicament of coming into life and not consciously choosing to do so, suddenly ending up here and waking up to this reality of like how much we have learned is normal, how much we have learned is possible, how much we have, learned everything about how we experience reality. And we call this waking up out of that because it really is this kind of fog that comes from this process called socialization, which is how we were taught to be as social creatures with each other in order to fit in order to belong, to be a part of the tribe, to be acceptable, right? What is okay and what's not okay? What creates pain and what creates pleasure? These are very basic survival instincts. There are two main drives that we have as human beings. These are really good to know too, like drivers of our behavior, right? What drives our behavior? So this is kind of getting to like the meta topic of, how do you live a happy life? By becoming aware of how reality works. And by questioning your reality, because if you don't question your reality, then you're just taking what you're given and life is happening to you and you're a victim to life. And of course, you're not going to feel in control. You're not going to feel good. You're going to feel anxious. You're going to feel depressed. You're going to experience all of these presenting issues. There's so many of them that are not going to allow you to connect with the natural state of well-being that is the fundamental nature of the entire universe. And by the way, reminder, we're living in a universe, right? Easy to not remember when you don't get up in the hills and look down where you were, or remember that you're this like tiny speck of dust called Earth floating in this infinite space. It's incredible how many things are happening right now instantaneously in this moment called now, which is the only moment that really exists. So let's, the nature of time, that's really interesting too. So the two drivers of our behavior, though, I want to remember to say those. Our drive for procreation, sex drive, and our drive to survive just in general, right? Like biologically, this life, this body wants to survive. If someone points a gun at you, you get scared because you don't want to die, right? Life wants to keep on living. So fight or flight mode is something that so many of us live in, which is a really interesting, predicament to be in and not be aware of how much you live in fear, right? What is the threat? We're looking for the threat with that survival instinct, the drive to survive. And then with the procreation, it's like, is this a potential mate? And constantly looking. Right? This is attraction, the desire to, to have sex, to make love, to fuck, to whatever, right? To become one, unity, right? That's, getting into the spiritual side of things, which is definitely what I want to transition into next, I think. So you learn what reality is. So we're talking about being free as well, because you learn what reality is, you become subject to all of these beliefs that you're unconscious of, these thoughts, these narratives, these stories that you're unconscious of drive your behavior. If you believe X is possible, then you're not going to operate outside of that, are you, right? And when you think that's your only possibility, you don't even see any other possibilities because it's the water that you're swimming in. And so this is the story that I tell all the time, and it sinks in more when you actually get to experience what the story refers to. So there are It's by David Foster Wallace, called This Is Water. Thank you, David. There are these two fish swimming along in the sea, and this one bigger fish swims along by and says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And the two younger fish swim along for some time until one turns to the other and says, "What the heck is water?" So, we're all swimming in water, which is unconsciousness, which is that which we're not aware of, which could be described as, let's say there's a bunch of items on the table, but there's just half of them are dark and some of them are in the light. You can't choose that which you can't see. So when we become aware of that which we're not aware of, you create more freedom of choice for yourself. And another way to describe it is, it's kind of like something that you're subject to that's like controlling you, as if like a marionette or something that you're not aware of. You're subject to it. It's controlling you. When you name that thing, which is a story, a belief, is a thought that you just keep thinking, which is what Abraham Hicks says. Thank you, Abraham Hicks. When you name that subject and it becomes object, now you're looking at what you were previously inside, in the same way you were like, maybe you were like in this fishbowl and you're looking at the fishbowl you were just swimming in, and now you're outside of that. That's greater awareness. That's expansion in your being. That's actual freedom. Freedom from that belief which you were unconscious of. Freedom to choose a new possibility from outside of this only one that you thought previously. And this is where they say, when the way you see the world changes, your world changes. And so we're literally changing your subjective experience of reality through transforming these beliefs. And that's fascinating, isn't it? And that can be done through a conversation, through vibrating vocal cords back and forth that we assign meaning to. Isn't it interesting when someone could say something that offends you in your language, someone else in another language could say the same thing, but it wouldn't offend you because you don't assign the same meaning to those vibrations. So, why are you taking that personally? Interesting. There's this part of you that takes things personally. That's interesting to notice. So we're looking at our internal experience. So if we want to be free, if we want to be at peace, if we want to be happy, if you want to be joyful, if you want to enjoy your life, if you want to feel alive, it's really good to be introspective, to look at all of the inner workings of our experience. There's so much to notice, but we can be caught in the monotony of daily responsibility and routine and just doing what we've been taught, and like just totally, that's why getting out into nature is so important, because our consciousness constricts when we're on these devices all of the time, computers and small phones, very constricted focus. In NLP, they call this like chunking down, right? It's very specific, it's very task oriented, it's very focused. And so when you're out in nature, you tend to be more expansive, right? You're not closed in, your consciousness isn't closed in. So, awareness itself, focus or attention and intention, those are really interesting mechanics of your internal experience. So taking responsibility for the meaning that we're making, the meaning that we learn to make, because someone else also might not take offense to what that other person said, but you did. There was meaning that you learned in your childhood that is now interpreted in a certain way where you take offense and you feel you need to defend yourself in some way. This is what they call the ego, right? Not as a bad thing, but just as your sense of self or personality, this individuality that obviously you have to be in this 3D reality. But it's funny how each thing leads to another. And we're going to fly right into some esoteric stuff, which is that you are an expression of one infinite consciousness, in the same way that leaves on a tree are like all of the different people and beings, but you're ultimately connected to the tree branch and the trunk and the roots, which are really only just labels that we've reductionistically put into place in order to be able to refer to different things, because we need to be able to do that, right? That makes sense. And so that can continue and go on and be very useful, but it doesn't actually point to the nature of reality. And so when you start to connect with the true nature of reality, then that's where you also start to transcend fear, because you realize that you're not actually separate from anything or anyone. And that's where namaste comes from, which is like, I see in you that which is in me. I'm a leaf, you're a leaf, we're all part of the same tree. We are life itself. Life itself. Life is not separate. Everything is energy. And although we see physical matter, we pay far too much attention to the material world than that which will be, which is the future, which is that vibrational state of focusing on what we want. And this is going to transition into the law of attraction. So what we want. This is really cool stuff. Thank you, Abraham Hicks, for these teachings. Desire. Wanting something different than you are or have. So this is going to get into how do we find inner peace as well. What we're aiming for is a state of being satisfied with what is and eager for what's next. So this is the balanced state of being. And obviously you're going to always find what works for you, right? So this isn't to say like this is the right way. This is pointing to, one of many ways, and we're all going to take our own nuggets of wisdom. So, oh man, I just had this amazing mango. Law of attraction. Desire is birthed naturally through life experience. In other words, life, part of its purpose is to show you contrast so that you, as this expression of the one consciousness, get to choose what you prefer. So you get to notice when life shows you what you don't want, you know what you do want. Both are birthed simultaneously. Where many of us go wrong in the next step, because that happens automatically. We can't not desire. You can't not prefer something else other than what is. What you can do is focus on one end of the stick or the other. And where most of us get stuck is life birth through contrast shows us something like, oh, I don't like when that person, this quality about them. And we tend to focus on that. Our attention gets drawn to the negative rather than saying like, this is what I prefer. And that goes for food or jobs or everything in life. I'm blanking at different areas. So this is really fundamental to notice that what is in our control. Because one thing we do when we're living in a state of fear is constantly try and predict the future based on the only thing that we can, which is the past, what has happened, to create a sense of safety and certainty for ourselves. These are drivers of our behavior, right? So if you want to be free from these drivers to do what actually matters to you, you need to become aware of these. So the past has no actual real bearing on the future. There's only actually this moment, but we have this faculty called imagination and memory, and we tend to use those two faculties to screw ourselves over. We say, because we're operating from a survival instinct, rather than using our frontal lobe and being able to like override that. But we tend to not be able to do that because we're so stressed out and overwhelmed, but don't even know that in this digital information age where like we are never off, which is why I think meditation is extremely important in today's age, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes a day. I think that's something that we should all do for our well-being or could benefit from. Even if you have other meditative activities, I still highly recommend not doing anything with our eyes closed, just resting just relaxing, just letting your thoughts and your heart and your breath do what they do. Hands off the wheel. You don't have to do anything, but you're conscious and alert and present to your own beingness. I think that's important. Just want to throw that in there. So what's in our control? And how do we operate day to day from that survival instinct where we say, based on this pain in the past, I don't want to do that again, so I'm not going to take that action that actually matters to me. And we stay stuck in that loop. I have this belief that is linked to this pain, associated with this pain, this story with pain, right? That's all it is. It's a story of what happened with an emotion, pain. And then we avoid that discomfort versus being with the discomfort and taking the action anyways, which can be very challenging because it's very much harder to go from 0 to 1 than it is from 1 to 100. In the same way that blowing up a balloon, hard at first, and then once you get going, so creating that momentum. And, law of attraction wise, so much momentum. I've been working with someone who had so much momentum in the negative direction that it was so hard for him to even begin to think positively. Because you have to slow down the train first. Some of these long trains take kilometers to stop because there's so much weight and momentum from the speed that they've been traveling. They have to slow down slowly to do it safely. And so similarly, in our experience, when we've trained ourselves, because that's what we've done, it's just a habit. It's not who you are. It's a habit. It's a way of thinking. It's been practiced. It's been learned. And if you don't own that, then you're not taking responsibility for creating your own peace, happiness, and well-being in life. And we're playing victims. And we have to, Elizabeth Gilbert, she had an amazing quote that I read recently. Let me see if I can get it. I haven't seen any transformation where that hasn't involved someone finally getting tired of their own bullshit. Something like that. So you have to admit to yourself, I have been playing a victim in my life. I have been disempowering myself. I have been avoiding and distracting and numbing and entertaining, and I have not been taking responsibility for creating what I at least want to believe is possible for myself in my life. Because right now, I'm failing at plan B, actually. And the thing that I really want, if I'm failing at plan B, how could I even begin to believe that I'm capable of something bigger, better, or more that actually matters to me, which is really vulnerable because that's putting myself out there. This is what we avoid, right? Like, we've been trained to not stand out. We don't want to be different. We want to blend in. We want to be normal and average and conform and fit in. These are drivers of our behavior. This is social pressure that creates the top regret before death, which, is just so incredible. And I see it in so many people that I talk to, and it can be subtle, and we can either be aware of it or not, and on varying levels, right? There's a spectrum there. I wish I'd had the courage. It takes courage to live a life true to myself. Why is that? Why does it take courage? This is what I've been writing a book about, right? It's like, I have to understand this because I experienced this too. I want to liberate myself. I want other people to liberate themselves so that we can create an epic planet together, and we're all, so many of us, I should say, holding back, creating resistance and inner conflict and not seeing ourselves clearly and not taking action that matters and living in fear and worried about judgment of others. And it's and we're all sharing that. How about we all just come forward together and create safety for each other and ourselves to be ourselves together, to actually do what really excites us, because it's crazy how much we've tolerated, honestly. It's no wonder we're anxious and depressed and numbed out. It's we're not, I want to get these words right. We're not seeing clearly. That's what this video is a lot about, is it's sharing this other perspective that I have from this spiritual awakening And through just working through with so many people now and seeing so many commonalities coming together, I created this quadrant. Maybe I'll show you to explain this a little bit better. Great. There's the quadrant. So we've got action, low action, and high action, the amount of action that you're taking in your life on what matters to you. And then we have potential, low and high, which is how much you see clearly yourself. So in the bottom left-hand corner, there's no action or little action and seeing little potential. So this is generally what some people might call unconscious, not as in a bad way, but just unaware. You're unaware. You're really still asleep. Maybe you're younger in your journey. You've been, deeply socialized, as we all have. And so, life is taking its time to wake you up slowly. No rush. Bottom right-hand corner, we have, okay, you're taking some action. This is probably like living the script of life, that I used to be on that path of go to school, get a job, buy a house, get married, have kids, retire at 65. Nothing wrong with that, just not what a lot of people want once they check off all the boxes and they hit 40. I work with a lot of those people who suddenly the things that I were promised by doing what I was supposed to do don't actually create the peace, joy, happiness, love that I imagined. So I didn't arrive at the place that I put so much work into. So you're taking action, but you see little potential, or you see not really clearly who you are or reality or what's possible. Now, the people who come and see me are usually in the top left-hand corner, which is you're connected in some way to your essence, to yourself, to your authentic self, to your higher self, to source, to just you, to more that's possible, to your potential, to your capability, to whatever. And something that there's more, something that there's got to be more than this. You're questioning in some way. Maybe you have for some time, maybe you're new to it. Whatever. You see. But you're not taking action that's in alignment with that. And that's painful. Painful for like our soul. Painful for like this inner being aspect of ourselves that's moving us into action. This is like life force, propelling us to become. You're endlessly supposed to be becoming. Why are you resisting your becoming? Because we're scared. We're scared of each other. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. And we all want the same thing, but we're all judging each other, not following our own path to happiness and peace. Simple as that. Simple, but not easy, because we are needing to learn to be the awareness that we are rather than be driven by our biology and our psychology, which you are inherently bigger than, because you are all that is. You are beingness itself. And that's where the real potential is seen. When you see the spiritual self, when you see the higher self, when you see the source that you are, when you see the consciousness that you are, when you see that you are presence, when you see that you are awareness, when you see that you are infinite potential and pure possibility, when you see and connect with that in some way, shape, or form, no matter how profoundly or shallowly or subtly or whatever, you are connected to something more inside of you that is calling. And action needs to be in alignment with that truth, because that's what the truth is. You are the truth. You are your own personal version of the one truth, which is all that is, which is consciousness itself, which has no end and no beginning. That's pretty cool. It's good to know. It's really good to know. So, that's what's possible. Important to know what's possible. Roger Bannister, this is the good story for what's possible. It was believed at this point in time, I should get the date, that it was humanly impossible, that a man's heart would literally explode if he ran a 4-mile minute. I always forget the title of this. I'm like, is it a mile in 4 minutes? I think so. Look up the story. I'll tell it. You can look it up. It makes sense. Go along with me. So it was literally physically believed that similarly to that the earth was flat and everything revolved around the earth is round, it revolves around the sun. That was a paradigm shift, right? In the way that we see the world. Isn't that interesting? And that can continue to change, and it has, from Newton to Einstein to quantum physics, right? And that's still a paradigm that we're catching up with. We tend to just put the past on the pedestal and really not get with the times. So, pardon me. So Roger Bannister, obviously the story is about him doing the impossible. So he broke the record and he did what science said was impossible. Impossible. He did it. That's pretty cool. But that's not the best part of the story. The best part is that weeks later, several other people did the impossible too. What changed? Their belief about what was possible. So there's this artificial glass ceiling that says you can or you can't. And that's a belief. Look at the telephone. Airplanes. I'm hearing one now. Computers and radio waves. Music and instruments. Look what we've created. From nothing. Everything existed as a thought at one point in time, from the intangible to the tangible. If that's not being God, I don't know what is. We can cut open our bodies and heal things. Medicine is incredible. Bringing the intangible to the tangible through focus, intention, and action. Wow. Tools of gods. I have yet to read Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari. He has an incredible book called Sapiens, which I've read the 3/4 of. I'm excited to have the time to read more of those types of books. Homo Deus. Gods. We are gods. Look what we're doing with this planet. Whatever we want. We have the ability to create tools, which has helped us master the planet, but not necessarily ourselves, has it? So self-mastery begins with self-awareness. You got to be able to see, how am I acting? What are my values? What am I thinking? Why? Why am I thinking that? Well, a lot of people don't even question their own thoughts. That's where shame comes from, right? Shame comes from believing that you're the only one with that problem or thought. Is that true? What everyone finds out is it's not. Doesn't make it just suddenly easier to speak. Of course not. It's an insecurity, it's a fear, that's natural. But this individual sense of self again, where are these thoughts coming from? Well, they were implanted from the moment we were born. You know, everyone thinks similar and very different thoughts based on their upbringing, based on the culture they lived in, based in the society, right? And what makes up society? The individual. It's like society as if it's this separate thing from us. That like everyone is, but like no one I know. It's really weird, like the economy. These sweeping generalizations of things. Looking at the tendencies of our mind. You know, one of the amazing examples is the confirmation bias. Confirmation bias means we look for things to reinforce the beliefs we already have, because creating that sense of identity creates that sense of self, creates that sense of security for us. So the ego, the separate sense of self, wants to preserve itself, of course, because it's taken on a life of its own. Right? That's why you need to defend your beliefs and your identity, because you've identified with a story or thought or belief. This is like religion, right? People will go to war for this, not realizing that that's like, you learned that. It is your truth, not necessarily the truth for everyone. So can we be at peace with our own truths? Diversity. Authenticity is diversity. In order to be authentic, everyone is going to stand out. That is what our strength is. That is what our strength is. Now, learning to cooperate in our authentic diversity, that's where the real magic happens. That's where creativity and imagination flourish, when we're able to hold space for each other's differences. And that starts with holding space within ourselves, right? Not judging ourselves, not resisting ourselves, not suppressing ourselves, because when we do so, we just project that pain of our own rejection onto others by judging them. And we disempower ourselves in the process and create separation. And that doesn't need to happen. So love is welcoming. So when you think of energy, think of it moving in two directions. It moves away or towards, right? Welcoming or distancing. And so anything within your experience, if you notice you're distancing yourself from that, it tends to be from something that we've internalized in childhood as bad or wrong. So I'm like, I shouldn't be that. I can't be that. I'm not allowed to be that. That's unacceptable. That's not okay. This is where shame stems from, the taboo that around our core fundamental nature of what's brought everyone into being, which is sex drive. There's shame around that. That's incredible. This is the waking up of consciousness we're going to see in our time over the next 100 years in the area of sexuality and shame. It's going to be incredible. It's really, really, really going to be incredible, because we are liberating ourselves together, and we're tired and exhausted of suppressing our nature, and sex drive is just one aspect of that. And that doesn't mean we just suddenly run naked in the streets and start fucking everyone. We all tend to go black and white thinking when we think of new possibilities. We think of two black and white extremes, but that doesn't need to be the case. So again, that's like a way that our mind works. So part of what fascinates me, if you haven't already noticed, in what I'll be leaving behind every day as I do these, is human behavior and our psyche, and how that self-concept was created, and how that drives our behavior, and how if you have unconscious drivers of your behavior, you're bound to be unhappy. That's why Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Until you become aware of that which you are unaware of or subject to, that will direct your life, and you will say, that's how, it was like meant to be or whatever. And you accept or settle for, or don't realize you live in ignorance. Ignorance is the cause of suffering. I believe that was Buddha. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't studied, but sure, we'll give it to Buddha. Cause of suffering is ignorance, unawareness. It's not bliss. You don't have control of your life. You don't have the real, and we don't know what we're missing out on unless you've experienced something else. That's the interesting thing about being stuck. And you think that because everyone else around you is experiencing something similar, that it's normal. But is that normal what's natural? And is that actually what's possible? And is that actually what you want for yourself? Because you have this life to live. So how are you going to live it? Time is ticking. It has been from the time you were born. And that doesn't have to be in a morbid way. It doesn't have to be in a threatening way. It doesn't have to be in a fearful and anxious way. It can just be reality of getting in touch with the reality of, we don't know when we're going to die, but what we do know is we're going to die. It's very important to connect with that, because you can get so lost in the everyday routine and monotony of that you don't even realize that you're going to die. So how will you want to have lived and loved and mattered? How would you have wanted to have lived? And to really reflect on that. I think it's important to live our life from the outcome of what we want, It's kind of like there's this great quote. A rose is always a rose from the time it is a seed to the time it is in full bloom. We tend to criticize ourselves for being at different stages of our journey, but even as a seed, you're a rose. You are that which you always will be, and that which you will become. You are a rose. A rose is always a rose. The essence of what it is there from the beginning. And that expression of that one essence changes throughout that time, right? Which is what we're here to experience. Time. We get to savor the deliciousness of the physical senses. We get to do that versus have to do that. It's not a burden, right? We got caught in complaining because the information that so many people download every day, either from their peer groups or from the information they choose to consume. Very important to be aware of the information we're choosing to consume. Is it empowering me? Is it making me feel love or hate or fear or jealousy or more positive emotions, right? Like, how am I reacting to my external reality? You notice that, like, if I say pink elephant, you think of a pink elephant. I just affected you, right? As I have been this whole time. But it's just interesting in that I can generate thoughts and feelings for you, right? So all you're doing is intaking light and sound through your physical senses right now. And that's actually changing your consciousness. I am changing your consciousness. We are affecting each other simultaneously. I'm affecting you just as much as you're affecting me. I couldn't have even said any of this if there wasn't an other, right? This is how, like, duality or physical reality came into being. Self and other have to exist for something to be perceived. So if you were all that is, if you were consciousness, if you were life itself, if you were beingness, if you were existence itself, which you are, what would you want? To experience the deliciousness of infinite creation happening instantaneously, always, without a beginning or an end, forgetting that happened and remembering and awakening to the joy of getting to create your experience. Having been melded by life into the magnificence of your true self. Now that's a wild ride that if I were spirit or intangible reality or awareness, I would want in on. I don't know about you, but I would, It's a wild ride. And we get to experience emotions and discomfort and joy and the highs and the lows. Experience itself is delicious. And if you can get into that space, then it's like, well, there's nothing to complain about. What are we complaining about? We're so lucky to exist, to have life, to get to choose, to have free will gifted to us. So much free will that we can put ourselves in a prison of our own beliefs. We defend our limitations and our thoughts. We speak into reality our existence, and we're not taking ownership of that fully. If you're not really enjoying your life, if you can't answer the question, are you really living your life with a fuck yes I am, what's going on, right? That's what I'm saying. It's gotta be a hell yes to that question. And if not, what can we change? What can we become aware of? What can we shift in perspective? Because we're not in touch with reality if that's not the case. And it's okay. It's not like bad or wrong if you're not. It's just realizing, great, I can have the power to improve myself, my reality, my circumstance, my relationships, my thoughts, everything. This is neuroplasticity, right? Our intentions literally shape our physical brain. Proven by science, neuroplasticity, and we still don't really get that, because if we really got that, we'd be doing some conscious, intentional programming of ourselves, wouldn't we? Gratitude, focusing, taking control of our attention to focus on what we want and what feels good versus what doesn't. That takes self-awareness. That takes intention. Most of us aren't using that fully to its full capacity. I've only just been practicing really in the last year more intentionally, and it's still surprisingly hard. It's a habit, right? These are skills that be cultivated. I think these were in Brene Brown's book, something like Principles of Wholehearted Living. So you can look up those. Wholehearted Living, Brene Brown. She talks about cultivating all of these things. So if life isn't how you want it to be, we do have the power to take control of that by becoming aware of what is within our control. Always our thoughts, always our attitude, always our focus, always our intention. Right? So it's not disempowering ourselves, which we have the habit of, victimizing ourselves, blaming others. Blame and judgment are disempowerment automatically. And blame and judgment show up in insidious ways we don't notice all the time. And that's the really interesting piece about them. They don't need to exist. There's nothing good, bad, right, or wrong here. But that's scary for people to admit. We go, we have to know. People aren't just like morally good and know what right action is inherently. We know not to kill people. We know we're harming the planet. We know garbage, shouldn't be everywhere. We know we're consuming massive amounts of power and electricity. These aren't wrong or bad. It's just we know we can't continue to do that infinitely. So we do need to change in some way. And that's going to happen on an individual and collective level. And it's too heavy a burden for any one individual to just do themselves completely all at once. That's why we need each other to specialize. Oh, you love healthy eating. I love psychology. Oh, you love transportation. Oh, you love all these weird, interesting preferences. They're really interesting, right? That just for some reason you love and enjoy that. And that's what we're here to do, is to follow that joy. Follow what feels good. It doesn't have to be bliss. It doesn't have to be some esoteric thing. It's just follow what feels good. And if you don't, you're going to want to look back on your life, I imagine, and be like, I'm really happy that I went out of my comfort zone and went past those fears and proved to myself that I was capable, and I failed along the way, or I learned along the way, and I grew and I became more of someone that I'm really proud to be. And I didn't let fears and the fear of rejection and failure and disconnection or my biology rule my life. I lived an empowered life. It felt good to me. I feel happy, deeply. I can say that I'm deeply happy. That feels good to say that I'm deeply happy, that I left something that mattered to myself, first. I did that for myself. I didn't die with regret. I lived a life worth living. I made it worth living. That felt good to have my hands in the clay of creating my life, because I knew I had the power. I wanted to believe that I had the power. And I didn't let judgment of others stop me from living an absolutely incredible life. Wow, I'm so proud of myself that I opened up to possibility, I deserve that, I was worthy of that. I was enough. I loved myself. I welcomed me into this world. I made myself belong. I took action on what mattered. I was present. I was present. Practice being satisfied and eager. And now, even on my deathbed, I'm eager for what's next, because I connected to reality. I connected to reality. And so, at the end of my days, I wasn't scared and I wasn't fighting, because I was already at peace. I already died 1,000,000 times. It doesn't end here. It's not about a heaven. It's not even about a returning to what is. You are always that which is, so you always will be. And what is after this life, when our timeline ends in this body, our mind can't comprehend anyways. So why try and guess and make sense of it and say probably this or not that? It's just other, limiting possibilities. Leave it a mystery. We have to make sense of everything? No, be happy. Leave it a mystery. Leave it a mystery. Let yourself be a mystery. Let other people be a mystery. I struggle with this, Assuming so much about people before we even know them or approach them. It's incredible what a bubble we put ourselves in. There's such a desire for the soul to express itself, but we fear judgment and comparison, and fundamentally disconnection, survival, and death. As social beings, we need, it's a need, it's not a desire, it's a need to belong to our tribe, to our community, to our relationships to each other. And that can drive us our entire life. Or you can realize that you have your own back. You are love. They are love. You will always be loved. You will always be accepted. That you are always acceptable. That there is a loving presence. That whether you're tuned into it now or not, just like your breath, it's always there. Conscious of it or not, always there. Where's the beginning and ending of a breath? The in and the out. It's one breath, still one breath. It's like sometimes I wonder what it's like to not be peaceful. I love the saying, when you get to know the one drop, you get to know the entire ocean. So by knowing yourself, you connect with all that is. But you have to become aware of what's here. We are all creative geniuses in our own ways. What excites us? Let's find that together. Let's find that ourselves. Let's share that. Why? There are an infinite number of reasons. You could find yours, you could not. It could matter, it could not. For me, I think it's the joy of it, and I don't want to look back and have regret. And so even when I'm not acting in the way that I want to or in alignment with my true self, there's no resistance there. I don't judge, blame, or criticize. I just go, okay, I'm going to do it next time. Okay, I'm going to do it next time. Okay, interesting, This is maybe not as important to me as I think it is. Actions express priorities. Gandhi. So what are our priorities? Are we taking action on them? Most oftentimes, there's at least one, and it tends to be something that really matters, that we've pretended isn't really a big deal, that we've been creatively avoiding, because it is what really matters. It's the vulnerability. But it has to blossom eventually. It's inevitable. And so that's very exciting.